If everybody come to, we have our fire. Well, I thought maybe by getting started, folks would take their seat. And that will give us our fire.
Now we're doing.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded. All in favor, sign of aye. Opposed, nay. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, we have you, okay, we've already reviewed the following ordinances on final reading, 5A and B. So now we'll move on to ordinances on first reading, 6A.
An ordinance to amend Chattanooga City Code, Part 2, Chapter 38, zoning ordinance so as to rezone properties in the 5100 block of Highway 58, more particularly described herein from R1 residential zone and R2 residential zone to R4 special zone.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Councilman Smith is not with us at the moment, so I do know a little bit about this case. I'm expecting a public hearing this evening, but it is also up in the air as to whether or not a deferral or a withdrawal might be offered. So all I can tell you right now is stay tuned.
Okay, thank you. They got you, Councilman Oglesby, but Councilman Gilbert.
Just real brief on A, John, do we get that language on the A we voted on last week, correct? I'll confirm that. All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilman Gilbert. Any other questions? Okay, now we'll move on to resolutions. 7A, B, and C was read into the record last week. So now we will proceed down to D, Madam Clerk.
A resolution to confirm the mayor's reappointments of Michael Mullen and Travis Little to the Metropolitan Airport Authority Board.
Okay, no questions. We have items number E, F, G, H, I, J, and K was read into the record last week. If there are no other questions, we will proceed to L, please, Madam Clerk.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Youth and Family Development to apply for and, if awarded, accept a one-time award from the United States Council of Mayors American Beverage Foundation for a Healthy America for Childhood Obesity Program in the amount of $125,000.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I see our real coach in here today, so he can give us an explanation. Thank you, Coach. Councilman Ledford, he about to answer your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the council, that's a grant, that's that Council of Mayors grant for giving us an opportunity to apply for that grant that will involve a large grant size if we got it, which would be $125,000. If we get the second place, it would be $25,000. And the grant would be used for promoting healthy cooking throughout our YFD centers, exercising more with our youth, the opportunity to have fun with fitness classes and so forth, just to expand what we're doing, kind of like what we've been doing at Avondale, that model, and we'll have an opportunity to take it throughout the city more in our other YFD centers. So it's really about reducing obesity and making it fun through cooking classes and exercise classes in a fun type way. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Are you good, Councilwoman Coonrod? Thank you, ma'am. Let's read M, please.
A resolution authorizing the administrator for the Department of Youth and Family Development to accept a one-time award from the Tennessee Department of Health for a two-generation approach grant for the Leading the Way Upward Playbook for the Upward Mobility Program in the amount of $456,065.80.
Councilwoman Coonrod.
Thank you, Chair. I keep telling everyone on this dais that Youth and Family Development is the best department, and this grant speaks for itself. So, Coach, I'm excited about it. Will you come share with everybody else what it's about, what it's for?
Yes, we was invited. Sometimes you get invited to apply for grants, and this is one of those times that we were invited. We didn't have to look for this one, but they contacted us, invited us to apply for this particular grant through the Office of Family Empowerment. And one of the strategies that we're trying to use through the Office of Family Empowerment is the second generation approach, putting high school students of the families that we work with that's in poverty and struggling, but putting them to work and giving them the opportunity to experience work-based learning experiences and teaching them money management skills and help them to realize that they don't have to stay in that same situation. So we're putting, through the work-based learning program, we're putting a lot of teenagers to work, more teenagers to work through the work-based learning, through the Office of Family Empowerment, and working with HR through this process as well. So, and the State Department liked that approach as far as second generational reduction of poverty. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Coach. Councilwoman, you good? Okay, you're great. All right, Madam Clerk, let's read N, please.
A resolution authorizing the mayor to execute a mutual termination of agreements related to the Young Men's Christian Association of Metropolitan Chattanooga and the Hickson Pike Aquatic Center.
Vice Chairman Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Coach, do you field this question? My question is, why are we mutually agreeing to terminate? Okay.
Thank you, sir. The YMCA group came to us came to the city a few months ago, and the pool that was constructed in that area 19 years ago, I believe it was, it has some heavy maintenance issues that are in need now, and the agreement does say that the city would handle maintenance issues. We are not, they have not asked us to do maintenance in all of those years. They've been handling themselves, but they're at a point that they've got pretty heavy maintenance, and they're willing to do that themselves rather than us do it if they owned the pool. So they asked if we were willing to terminate early. We said under those circumstances, yes. We also asked about how many citizens, residents of Chattanooga are using the pool now. And they gave us the numbers, and they're very small, and I can share those with you. But that's so that is the genesis of this, and it's a 30-year agreement, and we're at year 19. So if I can answer any other questions, I'm happy to.
What benefit was it to the citizens of Chattanooga?
That for a reduced rate, citizens of Chattanooga would be able to use the pool without being a YMCA member.
Okay, so they could just go and pay a fee, I guess, just
Pay a fee.
just to use the pool, but
Yes, sir.
not the whole facility.
That's right. That's correct.
Okay. Was that widely advertised? Because I'm not sure anybody even knew about it.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure how they advertised it. I know it was advertised at their front desk. They had shown me some examples of that, but I'm not sure if it was on how it was advertised throughout the media, et cetera.
And so over the 19 years, we have not put any money, any maintenance into the,
I don't believe so. No, sir.
okay, thank you.
You good, Mr. Vice Chair?
I don't know about if I'm good, but I've got all my questions answered.
Well, that's good to me. All right, Councilman Gilbert.
I have a couple, Chair.
Sure, absolutely.
The history of this pool, 'cause I was around during that time, they asked Hickson, did they want a recreation center? And they said, no, we don't want one. We'd rather have a pool. So we spent over $1.something million to put a pool down there for the Hickson area. As we know now, they got a center now. The question also is we not mistaken, bond money was involved with this. Have we paid that bond money off completely?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. And the people around in Hickson, I mean, when that was happening, there was not a lot of communication of availability, and the pool is for the city of Chattanooga, blah, blah, blah. Most people thought that was the YMCA pool and not the city pool, my understanding. What repairs are they proposing that needs to be done, and what was the cost of the repairs?
I can get that for you, sir.
Okay. Because I hate just to give them anything. That's what they requested years ago, and that was the agreement, and now they want to give it back to, renege, in other words, my opinion.
I'll get that for you.
Thank you.
Okay, is that it, Councilman?
Yep. For right now. Yep.
Okay, yeah, pending additional information. Thank you, Ms. Moore.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Uh-huh. Okay, if there's no other questions, that closes this part of our 3 o'clock session. We will now move on to a report from purchasing. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. And we have a visual. I'm not sure if IT has it up. So what we're going to do today is, as requested, give you a broad overview of government procurement and specifically how it applies to the city of Chattanooga. All right. So in general, just real quickly, what is the history of why we do what we do? Public procurement rules are based on spending tax dollars. We have to consider the public interest in being responsible and spending the funds fairly. The public procurement originated at a federal level first, and then, as we all know, it has spread down to state and local governments. Of course, the government needs goods and services to function, and it really focuses on how the decisions are made within the government. What the goals of government procurement are mainly are to first prevent fraud and corruption. So basically, who is benefiting from how we use our tax dollars is to prevent waste. So we focus on how we responsibly making choices and preserving what we have. And preference, we give, unless we're specifically authorized by law, we're not allowed to give preference, so we have to give every vendor an equal opportunity. When you contrast this with private procurement, their primary interest in the private sector is profit. Their process is shorter, there's less regulation, and of course it may be more detailed in large companies. In public procurement, our primary interest is the taxpayers. The process is longer. Like I said before, it's dictated by all levels of government regulation, and primarily determined by the contract type and the dollar spend as to how the process goes about. It's subject to public inspection, and it's contingent on funding. All right, so within the city of Chattanooga, the purchasing division is responsible for procuring all the supplies, equipment, materials, and services that the city departments require, as well as construction services. We serve as a vendor's first point of contact before, during, and after a contract existence, and our main procedural document is the one that you're familiar with. It's been on our website since the current version since 2014, and it's called our Purchasing or Procurement Manual. Real briefly, the purchasing division's also charged with running our surplus, so basically the back end of what the city does with what we buy. So going back to procurement, what our primary focuses are on transparency and competition. How do we determine the method that we have to use? It's primarily based on the dollar threshold of what the department thinks they're going to spend. So basically, we rely on what the department tells us as far as how what they're going to spend. The procurement manual allows a department to use a purchase card if the transaction is under $1,000, and there are limitations that are placed on this use. From between the amounts of $1,000 and $25,000, a buyer, it's just staff member in purchasing, obtains 3 competitive quotes, And this is where the area where we emphasize to vendors to register with us so we know about them. And then over 25,000, these are the items that this body is used to seeing. They are procured through sealed bids or proposals. We advertise in the Times Free Press, and it's not the News Chronicle anymore. Is it? What? Okay, and the Urban Voice, excuse me. So we advertise in the main publication in town and then a minority publication, as well as listed on the websites, our transactions over 25,000. So to get into the meat of what we were asked to go over, when we were talking about over $25,000 purchases, the main three formats in which we advertise this to the public, first being the bid solicitation, and this is when a department is able to develop specifically who, what, when, where, and how about what they need. They have to include full specifications with detailed line item descriptions and an estimated quantity for each. The second type is called a request for proposal. This is more commonly used when the department is not able to describe all of the detail that would be required for a bid. In a request for proposal, the evaluation is based on weighted criteria. It's applicable when qualifications, experience, or competence are more important than price, and the method will assist in selecting the best solution. The award is based on criteria evaluation and price, and on a final negotiation stage. The department submits a detailed scope of work that we then work on with them in order to develop the solicitation. The final method of procurement is less common, but it is required by Tennessee law. It's what's called a request for qualifications, and this applies to professional services. Professional services, as far as the city applying them, we look to the fields that are described in the Tennessee Code annotated, and which are generally those that require certification at the state level. And what is different about this process is that the qualifications of a vendor are determined before any mention of price or before any negotiation. So I'll pause at this stage. We have the rest of our presentation is a general overview of what we do and what's out there. But since we're in the meat of what you all see, are there any questions at this point?
Councilman Gilbert, then Councilman Byrd.
I see you had who, what, when, where. Do we have a follow-up behind that? In other words, once a person gets the bid, do we have responsible people going back to make sure it's done? And if they're not doing it, this might be a moral question, what's the consequence behind it?
So when we, what purchasing does is help a department develop a contract. So when we're done, when they have a contract, whoever the department head deems appropriate within a department then becomes effectively the contract manager as far as the substance of what's done. So as far as what purchasing's interaction is that we rely on the department staff to let us know if there's any reason for purchasing to help with any difficulties that may be occurring. We encourage all types of feedback, whether it be positive, neutral, or negative. But in general, the watching that substance shifts to the department itself.
Okay, this might be a moral question. Once we do a spec, they send it out for a bid. Once someone is awarded that bid, do they not supposed to check behind them to make sure periodically they're doing the job? And if they're not, let's say for example, we don't check behind them, is there a consequence behind not checking? on our end.
Yes, absolutely. Because we are contracting with them to do a service that is needed and necessary. So there is work being done to watch the vendor, to watch the contractor, and to be sure that we are getting the service that we need.
The reason I'm saying what I'm saying is, for an example, before the current mayor was here, we had a lot of contracts. I'm not a contract person. I'll probably discuss that later on another time. But in a lot of communities, we got sewage inside of the middle of the street that's sinking in a lot of places. And a lot of times we do contracts, in my opinion, they're not checking them good enough because we shouldn't have this many problems throughout the whole entire city. So if we're not checking to make sure that the process is done correctly, are we of accountability part of it? What happens? Is it just you did wrong, or you didn't check, or is there anything behind like discipline? Because I'm saying if you have a discipline problem behind it, most likely people are going to double check and make sure they're doing everything correctly.
From a purchasing standpoint, I'll let Bonnie answer, and if that doesn't suffice.
Sure. Our city attorney's office develops a document that's also on our website. It's called our Standard Terms and Conditions. And within that document, it provides the city the ability to either terminate a contract for convenience within about a month, or for cause within 7 days. So that remedy exists if our standard terms and conditions apply.
I understand that. I'm saying, say for roads, for example, we got trash need to be fixed for sewage. They put it in a year's time, it's already sinking. I think most of your contracts, after a year, they're not obligated, which I don't disagree with, but they're not obligated anymore. That goes back to our people making sure that they put the correct amount of gravel, whatever it takes, to make sure that thing will not sink. If we're not checking, what happens about that? The person is supposed to be looking to make sure that whatever we bid it out is being done. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, and purchasing is available to the departments to consult with them about how to manage a contract and check for things like that. But generally, we work with the contact in the department that knows the meat of what's happening, that knows the detail behind what needs to happen, and it's typically that portion of the department that then works closely with the vendor and would have that knowledge. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm going beyond you. You got to bid. I'm looking at if they got one to bid, who checks behind the person that had to bid, that won the bid? Who checks behind them to make sure they're doing the job? I guess it's a moral question, because your part is out of it. They already did it. Everything is going, should be going fine, but it's not.
Right.
Is there a consequence behind action when someone is not checking behind the money that we put into it? It could be millions of dollars, to make sure that it's done correctly.
Yes, sir. So whichever department has bid that service out, then that vendor's arrangement and contract stays within that department. And it is a part of that administrator's book of work to be sure that the people who work for her or him, the administrator, are following up on the work that is being done.
And when they don't follow up, then what?
Then there would be discipline.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at,
Yes,
that
sir.
part.
Yes, sir.
All right, appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Councilman Byrd?
Thank you, Chair. To piggyback a little bit off what Russell was mentioning here, Councilman Gilbert, is there any way, I guess this is for the city attorney, is there any way that this body can put in place that every bid that is awarded, that we vote on or that is awarded, that there would be a 6-month or year review, and if we find things that are not suitable or in place the correct way, we can terminate that bid, we can terminate their contract? Can this body do that since we're awarding the money at time?
Well, for each contract, it has its own survival provision, if you will. As Bonnie mentioned, our standard terms and conditions allows us to terminate upon 30 days' notice, with or without cause. So to answer your question, if you implemented a 6-month review process, and if the council then decided that the contract was not being performed, then you would have the, as I call it, the out clause, or the ability to terminate that vendor's contract without cause.
Okay, because I think, Councilman Gilbert, in the time we've been here too, that's something that I heard you and Councilwoman Burrs and several other colleagues talk about, that the accountability, what happens afterwards. And I did hear the staff say that, certain department heads could be disciplined. And at the end of the day, I think we need to have more teeth in that, to just say, hey, we understand this is the problem, and some of these contracts are not being done correctly, or some things are not, the follow-through is not good. So at some point in time, I think this body, and I would love to sponsor something if I could, that this body would say that, hey, in 6 months or a year, that after the review of that contract with this body, if something that was put out or something that was done, that we get the information to know how is it being maintained, how is it being done, and if it's done correctly, okay, keep the contract. If not, then we can terminate that contract. And the wording that I'm saying is probably not as accurate as it should be, but I think that's something that we need
I
to do
understand what you're saying.
to put in place, because we keep beating that dead horse, and it's like, we
So
still
you're-
don't get the outcomes.
So you're wanting to implement a review process,
Yes,
a formal review process,
Yes.
if you will.
to,
I can, are you asking our office to do that, or is it something?
yes, I would like to ask your office, because
Okay.
it seems like it's something that we continue to talk about, that we don't have any type of review process, but we spend a lot of our taxpayers' money, but we don't have the review process to say that, hey, this right here was done correctly, or this wasn't done correctly. And, although a department head can be disciplined, it's been told, like, the department doesn't work for us. Public Works or the YFD doesn't work for us, they work for the mayor. And so at that point, the discipline that goes on, I mean, we're still out of it, but we get the reaction from our constituents.
I can look into that for you.
I would really appreciate it. And then, Bunny, right here it says, I think I heard you tell me one time that a lot of the vendors, if you're not on the vendors list, a lot of people, you can't apply, or people don't know. You have to be listed as a vendor, or go on the site and put your name in. Say if I cut trees, or if I do plumbing, so anyone can come, or you have to be on the vendors list?
You do not have to be on the vendors list. I think you may be referring to the middle dollar threshold, and what I meant was that we encourage them to register with us so we know about them, but you do not have to register with the city to participate.
Okay, so if I do cleaning services and I see something go out that's has to do with cleaning service, I can then also put in my qualifications or request to get that bid, and I don't have to be on the vendors list. I don't have to do anything, and I can get that contract. That's what you're saying, correct?
You can have the opportunity
The opportunity to
apply,
receive
yes.
that contract. Thank you.
Sure. And if I could clarify what you were asking of the city attorney, but did I hear you correctly that you were asking regarding blanket contracts?
I kind of not just,
Specifically?
I think not just blanket contracts, any contract. I mean, we spend a lot of money, and every time you get up here, Bunny, you get berated with questions about what's going on, was the situation done correctly, did they do the job correctly? And it's a lot of stumbling around, and I think just at some point in time, we have to put a cap on it and say, hey, no more stumbling around. This is what happened. This is the cutoff point. If you're messing up or you didn't do the job, I remember with the exterminating situation, Russell Gilbert was very adamant about, hey, did they do the job? They're still having roaches. This is still going on. People need to know that, we're not playing, that if you don't do the job, it's over.
I would encourage being conservative and possibly limiting the scope of looking at this to blankets. We issue thousands of purchase orders every year, so basically to ask that to be applied to contracts in general.
I understand taking baby steps, but I just want to take a step. That's all.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Councilman. We have Councilman Gilbert, followed by Councilman Ledford, then Councilwoman Coonrod. So Councilman Gilbert.
Buddy, on small contracts, I mean small, for an example, we got a carpet back here, it looks terrible. I mean terrible. I wouldn't put it in my doghouse, but it's terrible. Can we not start looking at small people to do small work, to start doing things like that, instead of just waiting on a larger contractor to say, well, we don't, it's not big enough for us, and not doing this for us? We can, there's a lot of people out there that can do small work, like something like that. Can we start looking at that to start helping people get jobs, opportunities for the city, and hopefully eventually get bigger, but let them start on small things and do good work, and they can build their reputation on small? Can we start doing things like that?
Oh, certainly. Basically, within contracting, we have to balance a lot of factors. So within our office and Office of Multicultural Affairs, a lot of our outreach is focused at small businesses and educating them about how to see where they can fit in. If just using your specific example, I would say that effort would be balanced again against an operational judgment call, by the staff that knows about that area, and that in this instance being our facilities division. So basically, there are more than just one factor that goes into deciding how big to make a solicitation.
Can in the future we start looking at make it simple bid instead of making it so complicated that small companies don't want to be bothered because it's a hassle? Also look at sort of small companies, a lot of them work off to feed their families that month. I know we're working towards paying them quicker now, but to a small company, that makes us a big factor too. Can we look at that, say in a 30-day you will get paid, or say in 2 weeks you get paid, so that we can get some of these vendors coming in to do a good work and also get fed the same and get paid to feed their families? Can we start looking towards something like that?
I recognize what you're saying, and we see that effect in both small and middle-sized vendors. Basically, we have to balance that against, it's above purchasing. You basically have to balance it against finances, deadlines in which they have to do things. So that would be a citywide examination. But in general, the 30 days is standard.
The reason I say that because we had a person come up, we had Stacy come up here and say economic mobility. That's economic mobility, to get people to start, smaller people do a job. And we got so many opportunities in the city. We got so many jobs that's frozen that we can stop doing all these contracts with all these people that's not doing a good job and start hiring people to do a good job. Because, like, for an example, these several buildings that these people clean, well, that's like a 7 or 8 man crew, but now you're down to a 4-man crew. But eventually, if things keep going down, they're going to try to hire a contract service. That's what I'm trying to get away from. If we're going to say we're going to do economic mobility, then we need to look at our own house to stop hiring all these contracted things out and start looking at us doing it. Because I know years ago, we used to do that, and we did a very good job years ago, probably in the 70s, 75s, 80s. We need to get back to that because the city was working more efficient then than it is now when it comes to certain things getting done in our city. Roads is one, and other things in that nature.
Thank you. I hear you.
All right.
Councilman Ledford.
Thank you, Chairman. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi.
So my question is rooted in, since we're on the RFP and RFQ page, TCA, to my recollection, requires that we work a competitive bidding out. In 2007, I know they made a city code, or a statewide code change for RFP process when certain criteria are met, and I think this is what you're listing here, correct? But I think if you can help me understand, what process are we using primarily, and what does city code, Chattanooga City Code state versus what TCA states? Because one of the things that I've been interested in is when the city council is supposed to make a determination on the process. And then to my memory, I don't think we've ever made a determination on a process when it came to a particular procedural bidding process. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, and I can tell you that that what our purchasing manual describes a request for proposal process. It is based on city code that is then based on state code. So at whatever time the city code was developed, it would have been based on what was allowed within city code.
Okay, so
I'm
you're.
sorry, excuse me, state code.
State, yeah,
Yes.
I'm with you. So you're saying, to your recollection, that city code matches state code on that? We're following TCA.
Yes, typically the city code would only make a process more restrictive.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Typically, the city code appears to, at least in my area, appears to repeat the TCA or make it more specific.
Okay, so when we talk about the TCA portion, the city code, I think city code states that the purchasing agent, which is you, makes
Correct.
the decision.
Correct.
Correct, okay. TCA states the city council makes the determination. That's where I was, that's where I was asking, are we in sync with that? Or does that 2007 criteria handed down by the General Assembly kind of change that mindset? I'm asking, are we in sync?
I think that the point you're touching on is currently under review with the Office of the City Attorney.
Okay, so we're looking at this already?
Yes,
Yes.
Oh,
Think it originated through Phil, I
correct.
believe, so but I have heard about it.
okay. Well, then I guess I'm a step, I don't know where I'm a step, but that's good. I'm glad that you're reviewing that, and we're looking at that now, because I've been wondering about that for a while. Mr. Chairman, I yield. Thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you, Councilman Ledford. Okay, you may proceed.
All right, thank you. All right, and just to wrap up, what you have before you there is a view of our purchasing webpage, and specifically where we list the items that are above $25,000 or require public advertisement. We suggest to vendors that are getting started with the city or just in general to visit this page once per week in order to get a timely representation of what we have out there. What you see commonly, and what we were talking about a little bit before, are called blanket contracts. They are used to procure products or services repetitively. We establish the need for the product or service for a specified time, and we include, when we're explaining this to the vendors, what our expected usage will be for the duration of that period of time. It is not a commitment to buy all of the requirements from the vendor. It's established based on our competed pricing, and the main significant benefit to the city is that it eases the cost of procurement processing as well as a department operation. And as I'm sure you are all aware, our current blanket contract list is housed on our webpage. And you have there some examples, and you all are familiar with all of this, examples of what are considered blanket contracts to the city.
Hold on one second. Councilman Ledford, you want to speak?
I do. Thank you, Chairman.
Sure.
Hey, Bonnie, can you go back one?
Sure.
So last week or the week before, we had in purchasing that $2 million for police cars, I think, that line item, which was a blanket contract. Is there any way, because I made a point to point that out, to explain to the public, to folks that are sitting here, because, I mean, I know you all love the website, but not everybody has time to peruse through the website. And when they're sitting here and they're looking at blanket contracts, I think that this is great information for us here, but is there a way that in the future that we can put in some sort of language that kind of dictates that this is not a $2 million purchase, or this is a little, describing more what a blanket contract is? Because I had a lot of people seeing that on the agenda start lighting up my email and my phone thinking, you're spending $2 million, we have $2 million to spend on police cars, but we can't pave our roads. Okay,
I
that
understand.
literally was the question that was coming through. And so I had it clarified on the record. But we can't do that all the time.
Sure.
Is there a way that, can we think about this to help people understand that that is a ceiling and that we're not actually writing a check, so to speak, for whatever that dollar amount is, but that is the range of spending that we're authorizing, and we can't go above that, but that's not saying we are writing a check for that or spending that exact dollar amount. I just think it would help the public understand and have a little bit more, information to process than when we put those bigger blanket contract dollar amounts out there. That was just a side note, because I'd heard so much about the police vehicle purchase from, I think it was last week.
Yes, thank
Okay.
you. And right now, the two pieces do exist, at least as far as what a member of the public on the website, under our FAQ, can see what the nature of a blanket is. When they're bid out, the vendors that look at the piece of paper also are aware that there is no minimum or maximum. But if we need to incorporate something when it's presented here, that would be a conversation that I'm sure the mayor's office could have.
It could even be, honestly, a little asterisk that said blanket contracts, and then some descriptive language as to what that means. I mean, it could be a generic template. I just think people would like to know a little bit more about that when they see those dollar amounts, because they tend to be rather large.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Of course.
Councilman Gilbert?
Just to piggyback off Councilman Lefford, could we, as council, I don't know about the public, but council, say it's $2 million contract, up to blanket contract, could we not get the information prior to the year that we're basing that $2 million off of to tell us what we did spend for that year or past year? So in other words, if it's $2 million contract and we didn't spend but $250,000, then we can say this is what we spent last year, so we kind of can judge if we're going way over, or we're getting close to that amount, or?
Typically, when the amount that we are placing and what you see is based on an internal review of that, if it was a contract that existed before. Sometimes we're bidding things out that didn't exist before, so we aren't able to tell that. But internally, that is one function that purchasing serves, to review that in the system if the blanket did exist before.
So can we get that dollar amount prior to that year? So you're not saying that $2,500,000 that we spent close to that amount of money last year on automobiles, correct? On a blanket contract, because you just said that we don't hit the ceiling, but I want to know where we at on the ceiling, where are we at for last year? Because
Okay.
most budgets are based off last year and future. So you base your future off the last year budget. So I want to see what the last year, in parentheses, of what we spent that year, so it kind of tell us what we're spending.
I would think that it would be reasonable within the existence of a particular contract, say if the department was bringing you a renewal, that they could potentially state what was spent the year before. But the problem with, say, a rebid would be that the city is to some extent restricted to what the bid tabulation that you all see that's attached to our purchases. We do have to stay within that. So I would think that if there's any further education that you want when the items are presented, that it should probably be limited to, if it's year two, what was spent in year one. So just specific to that contract itself.
That's what I'm saying. Well, like year one was, say, $1 million. In year two, we're going to bid up to about $2 million, but we spent $1 million. That's what I'm looking for. How much we actually spent the prior year, because again, that dictates what you're going to do for the next following year.
Yes,
Can we do that on this things right here?
I'm sure that that's a conversation as far as where to incorporate that information.
Can you let us know when that will happen, or?
Of course, we can look at the issue.
Okay. So when next time you come up here, you already have the answer?
I'm sorry.
So when you come back up here, you'll have that answer already. Because a lot of times people come up there and they say, we'll get back with you, or we'll look into it, but it'll be about 2 years, 3 years later, we ain't still heard nothing from them. So I want to make sure that we got timelines that if we can and cannot do it, tell us one way or the other. And if we can't do it, then when is the timeline will be put on the paper?
I don't know if I would have the answer by 6 o'clock tonight, but I would think it would be,
No.
I'm
Not by
sorry.
night, I'm saying reasonable, like, is it gonna be a month, gonna be 2 months?
Sure. I would say within a month,
In a month?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
of course.
Thank you, Councilman.
All
Carry
right.
on.
Well, just quickly to wrap up, I did want to include an overview of what our Office for Multicultural Affairs Division associated with the Mayor's Office does to help us with our supplier diversity efforts. They do a lot of the city's outreach. They focus on small, local, women, minority, and service-disabled veteran-owned business owners. They are primarily focused on outreach and education. They also staff the Mayor's Minority Business Council, and they work with online as well as in person with coaching vendors, as well as referring them to our community partners that can also help developing businesses. And a couple of focus areas that what we call OMA has had over the past couple of years are conducting business surveys, the Kiva loan program, developing with purchasing and the city attorney what we call our internal DBE city certification, and then social media and tech training. So basically, if you have a diverse business that you would like to send to a source that's ready to help, that's the best office within the city. Another area of contract that you all see pretty frequently are in the area of construction. This is generally requiring a general contractor's license. The general contractors have to ensure that their subcontractors are licensed as well. There are bonding requirements and insurance requirements as well. And typically with a construction solicitation process, there's almost always a pre-construction meeting. And we have a couple of recent examples of a construction process, so the before and after of Miller Park. And are there any other questions?
Councilman Gilbert.
Going back to the minority business, I think the chairman came last week and spoke about some of the same thing, and one of the comments was, we had one person show up. How many people are showing up to these development meetings? And if it's not that many people, it's just one or two, what are we doing to encourage them to come? Because, like I told him, a lot of problems is they come to the meeting, but it's not necessarily helping them get to that next level. You mentioned bonding, you mentioned insurance. A lot of companies, smaller companies, have an issue with that. That's when I mentioned about smaller units, so that the bond would be very low, so they can build up. But if we're gonna have a program, like I told Chamber the same thing, then let's make it realistic and make it where it's gonna work. You know, 2 or 3 people show up, that ain't happening. We got a lot of people inside the city of Chattanooga that do work like that, concrete work, flooring, things, automobile maintenance, whatever, that has an issue with the payrolls and issue with trying to meet the payroll because they're a small company. And as you know, the people that they hire, they get paid every Friday. I mean, I don't care what happens, they get paid every Friday. And if you don't pay them every Friday, you lose your workers. But they're trying to meet that payroll as an issue, and I hope that going back to the economic mobility, that's part of that. We need to start finding people, say, this is what we got to help you be successful. Not just going through the process that you got to do this, 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 and this, but this is what we're going to help you do this, this, and that, so you can be successful. So that way we encourage more people to come. Because we got people out there, but they just getting tired of coming to a meeting, and that is not really getting to what they need to make them be successful. And they do good work, it's just that they don't have the resource.
Sure. I can tell you that if you engage with OMA, that you'll find that their outreach efforts and events are very consistent throughout the year. Of course, they can't force people to come, but part of what they do, either when they consult one-on-one with a vendor or when they're in an outreach event like that, is to make sure that they know, that vendors know to contact them to get connected with organizations such as the Urban League that can help them further with figuring out those details, if it's not something that either purchasing or OMA can help them with.
The reason I say that because I have so many contractors, mostly, say that they can't find good work, or they want to get work with the city, but the process is too long. The process is, you don't get paid quick enough. These things I'm talking about, for straightening that out, start on a small scale. It don't have to be a large, but small, so that we can start getting them work, so they can become bigger companies that can actually afford the bond and the insurance and things of that nature. But they got to start somewhere. I think that we as a city, since we got so many programs, we should provide them an opportunity to be successful. And what the opportunity is always go down to resources. They don't have the resources to make them be successful. So that's what I'm getting. Hopefully in the future, I know Mara and Tony's out there, and they can kind of help with that. Because that's the biggest thing they tell me all the time. The same thing over and over again. So we can stop that, that'll help. Tony, if you're going to speak, come on, Tony, go ahead and talk to me.
I was just going to add, one of the things that we're currently engaged in is the disparity study as it relates to our procurement process. And they're, excuse me, they're pretty close to completing that review, and we should be contacting the council chair as to scheduling a time for them to come and make a presentation to council of the findings.
I appreciate that. I just hope we start looking and thinking, how can we help that smaller person? How can we think outside the box? It don't have to be a large scale, but something small, starting out, so we can be successful. I appreciate it.
Okay, Councilman Byrd.
Thank you, Bunny. Could you please email me this presentation?
Of course.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
You through?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank
any
you
other
all.
questions? Okay, thank you, Bonnie.
Thank you.
Well, if there's no other business before this council, we are adjourned till 6 o'clock.